That was a lot of information. And would anybody like to ask questions or engage in discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase the question really. I'm a special educator, special education, and I work with second to fifth graders in a school that's like for just behavior. So it's a nonprofit organization, and then I work for Columbus City, and then they contract us to go in for the IEPs. And when you were speaking to all of the, gosh, for the like the restraints and the seclusion and the amount of, you know, inequity, it's just, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, all my little boys, they're all black, all of them. And we're in the ghetto, and it is sad. I mean, the situations where these boys come from, it's really sad. But the restraints, I have to. I mean, I'm getting desks thrown at me, I'm leaving bruises. I mean, I could restrain. There have been days when I restrained 10 times. You know, short times. But I mean, and then there have been days when there have been 9. Lately we've had a really good long stretch of like 2 months without any restraint. It's been fantastic.
What have you been doing differently during those 2 months?
We got rid of 3 of the boys. They're now to a different school. And our class just completely, the climate in the classroom changed. And I know, it is, what are we doing differently? I mean, you know, you're always asking yourself that question. And, I mean, it's sad. It's just incredibly sad, and I don't know, as a special educator, I want to go, I think we have to separate when we're looking at the disciplinary practices. I think we need to separate special ed a little bit from the rest of it and ask what are we really looking at with it? You know, that's when I look at this, what I think we have to do. Yeah, especially with the emotionally disturbed boys that I'm doing, and the emotionally disturbed kids, because they're coming from places where the abuse has been horrible. I mean, at the school that I teach 2.5 hours a day, and they have social groups, and they have counselors that come in, and they have people that go home. I mean, very extensive services for these kids. And we see progress, and some for some, and others we don't. It just depends. And it's very sad.
Well, you know, I have to be honest. One thing that breaks my heart is to hear we got rid of 3 of the boys,
Well,
because I wonder, no, and I hear what you're saying, I do. I wonder what happened to them and what kind of services that we're getting.
What happened with them, I should say, 2 of them, one of them graduated. 2 of them have been there for 2 years, and we were not meeting their needs. I mean, they were not growing. They were not changing.
That's a key thing,
That's
though.
what's happening.
Right.
So, and it's a special school where the kids go there for that. And they go there because the other schools don't want them. They're like, we're done with these kids. We're done with these kids. We can't do anything. Where they go there.
And that's a shame.
And the next,
that's a
and then
shame.
the next avenue for these kids would be, and it's also it's a team decision. You know, with parents, with whomever. They could go to a facility which would be a residential facility. We have one on site, but like a lockdown facility, which is one of the kids went to a lockdown facility because he just very mentally, you know, unstable. One of the kids, 2 of the other boys, the other one graduated, the other one didn't like that. But so he just left, or 2 of them left and one graduated. So then they went to a Columbus City school that's just without any supports. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just an all academic.
I'm sorry,
You know.
is there a question?
The question, forgive me, I'm sorry. The question is, how do we do that? How do we do the restore? How do we see change with that?
One thing I just wanted to say, yeah, I don't have the answer to what a solution would be, but I really think it's a shame that a lot of students with disabilities, we see in the research, they're actually penalized for the manifestations of their disabilities. So you're talking about a student who actually has an emotional disturbance. Yes, that student is going to throw a desk because he's emotionally disturbed. But instead of, we need to provide these students with the supports and services they need instead of punishing them for the very manifestation of the issue that they have. And if they're not getting the help they need in a lockdown facility. They're just not. But I'll pass it on.
There's a couple of thoughts that I have. I mean, the first one is that, you know, again, language is important. Not these kids, our kids.
Okay.
Right? That's number one. Number two, you know what's sad? What's sad is that on a very basic public policy level, there are certain solutions that we know work that we aren't implementing. Things like prenatal care, things like early childhood education. So, okay, but let's be honest, right? Because you can look and sort of say, well, how do we do the restorative thing? But the restorative thing is not a panacea. There is no magic pill, right? We know that 51% of children attending public schools in the United States today are living below the poverty line. That is shameful. Right, and so, you know, this is, you know, I think that this is the place where, you know, the equity question, the philanthropy question, the public policy question, the union question, the what do we actually do in the classroom question really kind of congeal. Because it is absolutely essential that when we talk about, like, what is the advocacy that we do, that we are honest about the problem that we are confronting. Right? But that doesn't mean that we are absolved. And it doesn't mean that on the day-to-day when we are in the classroom with our kids that we're allowed to do nothing. And so what I would say is, you know, are you doing intentional skills building? These are the questions that I would ask you, right? Are you doing intentional skills building with the kids? Are you involving the parents before the kids end up being in trouble? Are you thinking about resources and other services that the kid might need to be attached to in order to be able to progress? Those are the questions that I would ask. But, you know, well, how do I do the restorative thing without taking, you know,
Well, and I do feel like we are doing the restorative thing to a certain, I mean, that kind of, it is in play because we have the social services happening, you have the social grouping happening.
I would just answer very quickly that one of the issues that we faced is the decertification of students who really do need a lot of service. And so they're in the traditional school, their needs are not being met, they are behaving in ways that would be expected because of their need, and then the discipline is being enacted. And so what I would argue is part of our activism has to be to make sure that all of our students are getting the educational and socio-emotional supports they need from pre-K all the way up to 12.
Can I just, if I might just add very briefly on the, well, so if DOJ were in that school asking questions, they would certainly be asking about the number of students that are ED. So what we know is that ED, by far, has the greatest disproportionality,
Right.
and the most Black boys are identified as emotionally disturbed somehow, and they are also underserved by teachers that look like them and that actually represent their community. And what we know is that Brown v. Board was a victory, but 30,000 Black teachers lost their jobs after Brown v. Board. And we have to absolutely talk about the big picture, and we've got to step back and ask those very difficult questions about the students that are represented, that you're talking about, our kids who are suffering from a variety of different factors, who have been labeled as one thing or another, and then we want to kind of separate the conversation and talk about special education or something else.
Okay.
I want to say something. I really like the fact that you're focusing on the early childhood population because I've been teaching for 38 years now. Taught 5 years in New York, just retired from DC from 33 years. This is my 39th year.
Bravo.
I cracked Michelle Lee's wig because I became one of 7 expert teachers in DC this past year. So I retired and I left and I went on to do my work in another district. But I want to say something. This year is my first year back on the elementary level. I am a special education resource teacher. My specialty is reading. However, I have 5 kids in between kindergarten and first grade who are on medication, who are considered ADHD, and they are off the chain. I feel sorry for the young teachers who have them in their classrooms because I, as a senior teacher, I would do something differently with them. I would give them the "oh my mama" shake and tell them, you better sit in that chair, you better not move. Or some of the other things, you know, I would give them the discipline that they didn't get at home. And I would do it verbally, but we would develop a relationship. One thing I think is there needs to be a checklist. When kids are coming through school, there needs to be a checklist so that we will know who needs what kind of
Early
discipline or we have to have that in place. The other thing is we have to get rid of programs like Tools of the Mind because kids are sitting down all day, writing and reading. We have to bring back the old school ways of giving children the opportunity to play, to learn social relationships. That's what's missing, and because that's missing, we have all these problems now, these social problems. So let's smack that curriculum, and let's put it back where it needs to be. Common Core is not working because we have these issues that we have allowed to clutter, and they are infecting our classrooms. They're blaming the teachers. We are not to blame. Give us the training and put the curriculum back in order like it needs to be. My time is up, I thank you.
Okay, let me just respond very briefly. This is nothing pro or con to tools of the mind, but if it is being implemented where kids are not playing and up and out of their desks, it's not being implemented correctly.
Well, the professional development was not given properly with it. A lot of times companies sell school district materials, but they never give the teachers the hands-on support that they need to implement it properly. And then school districts don't order all the materials that go along with it. They don't order the supplementals, and so therefore they put us at risk before we even use the new curriculums.
Yes.
Hi, I'm a special education teacher in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and we actually just had this conversation on Wednesday where our guidance counselor was sharing all of our SWIS data, which is our discipline reports. And I think as a school, we felt really confident that we were defeating that and that we are doing a lot of work towards equity and felt really confident. Seeing our numbers was really it felt bad because we're a predominantly white school. We have like 70–80% white, and I think it's like 13% black, and yet our black students are, I think it was like 3.5 times more likely to get a discipline referral than our white students. And that just really struck all of us, and we're all just kind of in this place of what do we do? Like, we thought we were doing a good job. It's not obvious to us. It's definitely one of these biases that we do not see and do not intend. And so my question is I'm feeling very inspired right now to like do something with this and make a change and make a difference. And are there opportunities to engage in these types of professional development opportunities that the two of you were talking about that like our school could come to and bring back even though we're in
We'd be very happy to have you.
Okay.
We'd be very happy to have you. I mean, awareness is only the first step, right? That's why I was focusing so much on the skills, right? And so awareness and wanting to engage is, I mean, that's, I would say, what, like 70% of the journey, right? And that, but then there's the hard work of actually sort of developing the skills that you need in order to be able to make sort of different decisions in every one of those moments. But congratulations to you and congratulations to your school for doing that work. That is not easy. That is not easy. And as you say, it feels bad. It feels bad. Among well-intentioned people, it feels bad. So,
especially when you're hearing these things about these pipelines, it's like I just want to blow that pipeline up. I don't want to see my
That's right.
students. You know, I mean, our whole intention as a teacher is to see our kids
That's right.
grow up and be productive members of society, and it's just really, really difficult to think about playing any sort of part in putting them in a pipeline.
yeah.
So I should say there's materials on the table that has information about some of these programs. We're also going to be posting both the video of this session, the slides, and some more resources on the Shanker Institute website at www.shankerinstitute.org. So I'd like to get a couple more. Yes, ma'am.
Janelle, I think you brought up a good point about students who are in the general education setting who have not been identified and therefore are not receiving the necessary services and supports to address and to address their social, emotional, and behavioral needs. I say this as a special educator at a self-contained school for students who have been identified with emotional and behavioral disabilities. I believe the converse is also true. There are students who have been inappropriately placed in settings such as the setting in which I teach. I don't know every student's story, but I know my students' stories, and I often wonder who misunderstood or misinterpreted what that placed you here. Because I believe many of these students could be served and supported in less restrictive environments. And that's a question that's been on the back of my mind forever and ever. But my question is, regarding restorative practices, what do they look like at different ages, different ability, with students of differing abilities. And how do you approach those conversations with different populations of students? Elementary school, middle school, high school?
Yeah, so the circles work that I was talking about, we found to be most appropriate for middle and high school students. And the circles work, I think, you know, for a long time, the field of social emotional learning was quite weak on the middle and high school level. And I think that the circles work has really kind of cracked that nut. Because the process itself meets two key developmental needs of adolescence, right? It meets the need for having a voice, and it meets the need for having a sense of belonging. On the elementary school level, we think that the workshop model works better. Kids at, you know, sort of in the younger years have a harder time sitting still. It's much harder to wait for the talking piece to go all the way around. And I think that you know, with we think of this as being really a universal intervention. I mean, I have one school, a middle and high school in Brooklyn, that I think is doing some of the best work in the country around restorative practices, and 35% of their kids are special ed. So I really think that it's about relationships. It's about making sure that the groups are small enough to have a good circle, but not to have it be that you have to wait 30 minutes for the talking piece to go around. So some of it is logistics.
What school is that?
Brooklyn School for Collaborative Studies, it's called, BCS. And I think that it has a lot to do with making sure that there's consistency between what we're doing in the community and skills building piece and what we do when the rubber hits the road, right? So we can talk about building community, and we can talk about building relationships, and we can talk about having a peaceable classroom, but if as soon as, you know, little Bobby does something that really ticks you off, you revert back to the, you know, to the kind of punitive language, to the shaming language, to the pushing out language, you're going to lose buy-in from your kids in that first process, right? So those two things have to exist in tandem with each other: the skills building, right, and the consistency in making sure that our disciplinary responses are aligned with restorative practices, right? That's the basis. The question of, like, what do we do when something really goes wrong? The tier 2 stuff is, you know, what you do when you're a little bit further along on that continuum. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more.
I just have a question about the Dignity for All Students workshop. Is that something that UFT created, or is it a program that you can train in?
So New York state law requires that any new person getting certified get training in this Dignity for All Students work. The UFT designed a 6-hour workshop that really focused on these issues of microaggressions, the implicit bias, the planning and preparation. I can get more information for you. You have my email address. Feel free to contact me.
I have one more question for the panel, which is, New York City had a change of, you know, of its law earlier than most. There's a lot of places that are just going through this process right now. You also have a lot of resources that other people do not. One of the secrets of why so many kids are suspended is because it's the cheapest thing that can be done. You send them home and they become somebody else's problem. What would you say are the places that you could turn, in addition to going to the table and trying to collectively bargain? What are the places in the community where you can turn to try to get some support for looking at this a different way and for helping kids who need it?
Certainly partnerships with organizations that represent parents and community,
Yes.
right? Like hearing from the parents of these students and identifying what their priorities are, calling it out so that we can agree that we all have the same priorities to ensure that our students are the most successful that they can be, and figuring out how to put in place a discipline initiative that will allow us to achieve that goal with maximum respect. I think that's one of the ways to go. I also think elected officials, having conversations, in lobbying conversations, when we're talking about the kinds of funding that we need, establishing this as a priority. This is a meaningful priority that many of us could agree to work toward.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to echo the elected officials piece, and, you know, something that has been very concerning to me, and I know to others, is just the amount of turnover at the administrative level. And, you know, it seems as though that we see a lot, we can see policy reform happen, and then a superintendent will lose his or her job because of it. And then implementation can't take root because of that, that turnover. So, you know, we're very interested in civic participation, civic engagement around school board elections, around support for superintendents, and really making sure that the folks that are in these leadership roles have the opportunity to stay and do the hard work of actually then implementing at the classroom level. So I just wanted to absolutely second what you're saying.
And so I'm going to second what you said, because this morning I heard Becky Pringle on the panel talk about the importance of us as educators becoming policy makers, that we are engaging in this process. We have to learn how to understand, how to write, how to read, and how to advocate for policy. That's this important work that we're talking about. Discipline is one issue. There's so many others, and I think that's where our voices can certainly be heard.
Please join me in thanking the panel. I think this has been very good. Thank you.